Well, this is an interview for the Alhambra Creek Watershed Oral History Project, and our interviewee today is Joe Brenkle, and we're at the Brenkle Ranch in Crockett, Martinez,
Martinez.
Martinez, California. I'm Kathy Pardick doing the interviewing, and Brett Stevenson is working the video. First of all, I'd like to start out with just some basic background, family, personal information, and then we'll go into your life here on the ranch and some other things. So, where and when were you born?
I was born right down the hill here in the ranch house in September 21st, 1927.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Who was the first member of your family to move into this area?
My grand uncle was Joseph Brenkle. Also, I was named after him. So he moved into the area in about 1897. That was the first time he bought property here. Okay, so that was the first piece of property he bought, and so we've been here on the family's been on the ranch since over 100 years now.
You mentioned when I was speaking with you earlier that you actually have the deed that your uncle.
Yes.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, I have it right here.
Oh, you do it.
You
want
want
to see it and get a copy of it if possible? Well, maybe should we wait? Since 1897.
Yes, my uncle has, and then he didn't have any children, so he wrote his brother, who asked if one of his nephews would be interested in coming over here and working the ranch with him. And so my father came out of the French Army. He finished his enlistment, and then he came over here to work with my uncle. And then he rode back for his sweetheart, my mother, from the old country, from Rietzel's, a little in Alsace-Lorraine, and she came here. So my dad came here in 1923, and my mother came here in 1925, and I arrived in 1927. So, but this is the, well, this is one of the deeds that goes from Bernardo Fernandez to Joseph Brenkle.
Oh my gosh.
In 1897. That was the first deed. He bought the 192 acres across the freeway here, and it's all handwritten, as you can see. Yes. And he paid a total of $4,000 in gold species for that.
It was a lot of money at the time.
Yes.
Huh?
Well, he apparently he immigrated here because at the end of the Franco-Prussian War, Germany annexed Alsace-Lorraine, and then any young man who became 18 would be drafted into the Prussian army for 7 years. So every young man who became 18 took off, went to America, and that's how he came to be here. And so he worked across the country from Pennsylvania, and he ended up in Suisun, up by Suisun, up in Rio Vista, and he worked in the Montezuma Hills. Now, if you ever heard of the little town of Bird's Landing, I'll tell you, I heard many stories with a kid about Bird's Landing. Now, Bird's Landing has about 5 houses, 2 bars, 1 grocery store, and a gas station. but it's right over here. And the reason he didn't like that area was because of the flooding. There was, at the time, there was no control of the Sacramento River, and there was periodic flooding up there. So he decided to purchase land here in Contra Costa County. So that's how he came.
Do you know what it is he liked about this particular property?
No, I don't know. Maybe it was just, I don't know. Maybe it was just for sale or something like that.
Does the creek run through your property?
The headwater,
Creek or one of the
the headwaters of the Franklin Creek originates right here where the little dam is that you crossed.
Oh, okay.
So.
Do you think that played a role in his choice to live here, having the water nearby?
I don't know that it did. I think I think they needed sufficient water, and they drilled the well
Okay.
down in the property. They had to have water for the animals, for the horses, and it started out as a horse and hay farm. Remember that he was a teamster. My uncle Joe. I'll show you pictures of him here, but he was a teamster and drove these big combines, you know, with 20 to 25 horses at one time pulling these combines. They didn't have steam power and so there was a big demand for horses and hay, and this is what he was built this ranch for, or this farm for.
Is that same well still in use? I mean,
Yes.
usable?
Well, if you don't drink it, it's in use. It's you know, the regulations on drilling wells is quite different now. For example, we just drilled 2 wells on this property, and we had to seal them for 50 feet depth. The depth of the well that we used for all the time I was growing up was 15 feet. So and we used to come up here and get deathly sick every time we drank the water because we were not. But my parents had no problem with it. So, okay.
So your father worked on the ranch then?
Yes. My father and mother had an arrangement with my uncle. They shared. It was kind of on a share basis. I think my uncle got 25% of any profit we made, and my mother and father kept 75% of it until he passed away, and then he inherited the whole place. But they made a living off of the land, off of the ranch, with various grain and hay and selling animals, you know, like cattle and hogs and so forth. So.
Were there any other crops ever raised in this area or on your property?
Yes. In fact, one of the things I'd like to emphasize is the fact that this whole area was a wheat-producing area. In fact, my uncle came from the Montezuma Hills, as I mentioned. This was a big wheat-producing facility with the combines, and the town of Port Costa, if you know it, was bigger than San Francisco at one time, because the ships would sail in through the Golden Gate, and they would load up at Port Costa. If you drive from Port Costa to Crockett, you see all these old wharf pilings down in the bay, and those were the part of it. And one of the leading men in the area was this man George Washington McNair, who was the wheat king, and he owned, in fact, this parcel of land. My uncle bought that in 1904 from George Washington McNair as an extension of the land. So.
Okay. What did your parents like about the ranch and living in the Franklin Hills and in Martinez?
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't put it what they liked. It was a rough life, okay? It was during the Depression. Things were very hard, but they managed to earn enough and scrape enough money to live off the land. My dad, we can go into the crops and what they did, but their main income was from products that they sold from the ranch. And then if you looked at our table, when we ate, half of the food that we ate came off the ranch, okay, or the farm. At that time it was a farm. Now it's become a ranch, okay. All right.
So there were more crops that they sold, and also did you have vegetable gardens and that sort of
Yes.
thing for the family?
Well, the main crops we had, we can get into that now, is we raised grain, wheat, barley, oats, and at times they were harvested with a binder, we called it. That was a binder to go around and mow the crop bind it into bushels, and then you'd collect the bushels and haul them down to a central place and stack them, and then the threshing machine would come along and would thresh the bundles of grain, which was assembled, and you would stack up the bushels of whatever that is. It's wheat, barley, or oats. See? And that was a crop that, for example, the wheat we would use for feed the chickens and the pigeons, and the barley would be fed to the hogs along with skim milk from the dairy, and if any excess we would sell. You would sell, and that was part of the cash flow. And then the other crops were the hay. We would make hay after. You have to realize that these hills here were all plowed. The whole, if you can imagine the hills that you just came up and all over there, and I don't know that, but you see that steep hill on the side over there across the way? Mm-hmm. That's not our property, but I've been told that was once farmed with horses.
Steep.
Yeah, and you couldn't do that with tractors. Okay, it's too steep for that.
How about your schooling? What schools did you attend?
Well, I went to Rodeo Elementary School, then I went to John Swett High School, and then I went to Marin Junior College for a year, and then I went to I won an appointment to the Naval Academy, and I went to the Naval Academy, and then when I graduated from the Naval Academy, I transferred to the Air Force. At the time, they took people from West Point and Annapolis to the Air Force because the Air Force didn't have its own academy at that time. And so then I went to the University of Michigan, but was sponsored by the Air Force for 2 years. And then after I resigned from the Air Force, I went to the University of California at Los Angeles for a long, long time.
What degrees did you get?
Well, I have a bachelor's degree from Annapolis and 2 master's degrees from the University of Michigan, and I almost finished a PhD from UCLA. I didn't finish my thesis. I dropped out. That's one of my big regrets in life.
Is it?
Okay. Yeah.
Well, it sounded like you have quite an education. I wanted to get that.
Okay.
You were rather modest.
What did you study for your different master's degrees?
The 2 master's degrees were in engineering. One was in aeronautical engineering, and one was in instrumentation engineering. And at UCLA, I studied astrodynamics mainly, which is the motion of spacecraft through the like celestial mechanics.
Okay. Well, kind of back to your childhood. Did you have any brothers or sisters?
Yes, I have a younger brother. He's a priest up in St. Helena, and my sister Betty was a nurse, and she lives in Martinez. She stayed on the ranch with my folks until after they passed away, and well, they moved. Yeah, they moved shortly before, about 1990. Before it was just too much for my sister to try to manage my parents and the ranch.
Where's Betty living now?
She lives in Martinez, in what is it, Virginia Hills? Yeah.
Okay. What sort of hobbies did you have growing up? What did you like to do?
What did I do? Well, there was no activities like soccer or scouting or things like that because nobody would do it. My folks were just plain too busy to take me any place, okay? So we made your own things. I had dogs. I had a .22 single-shot rifle. I had a horse, and things like that. Okay.
When did you marry, and what is your spouse's name?
What was your name? Jacqueline Walter. Okay. Yeah.
And when did you and Jacqueline marry?
We met at Annapolis, Baltimore, after a football game. She was going to a girls' school, and I was naturally in a boys' school, and so we met at a dance. She tried to teach me how to dance. She never succeeded. But she would have gone with anybody as long as it had a midshipman uniform on, because the end thing for those girls was to go date somebody to go to Annapolis. And if you were an in crowd, if they didn't make, so she didn't care. But I fooled her. I brought her to paradise here. See.
Yeah, I'm still looking for the oil well.
How many children did you and Jackie have?
Four.
Okay. And where are your children now?
They're all here. Okay, Debbie is married and is suffering from cancer right now. She lives down here. Tom is the guy right outside. He's building this house. My daughter Kathy lives in Antioch. She's head of a day school center, and she's going to build a house over on the other hill. And our son John, lives in San Ramon, and he's a landscape architect or builder. Okay.
Okay. So, what kind of work did you do?
Well, when I was really the first time I went to work was when I was in the Air Force, and I was a guided missile officer. I went into guided missiles, and we got was stationed in Patrick Air Force Base next to Canaveral. And then I went then we were shipped to Germany for 3 years, and I was in charge of, well, at first I was a launch officer for one of the missiles, and then I became what you called a target data officer, which would do the computations for the guidance of the missile to the targets, to the Russian airfields in the East Germany, and so.
Quite a change from your ranching.
Right. That was the idea. Okay.
Okay.
And
now, I'm sorry.
but then I went, when I later when I was still in the Air Force, I worked in the ballistic missile division in Los Angeles, which was developing the Atlas intercontinental ballistic missile. And then I resigned from the Air Force and went to work for JPL and worked on various lunar and solar and Martian and Jupiter projects, navigation mainly.
Can you say what JPL is?
Jet Propulsion Laboratory, yeah. They're part of California Institute of Technology. They're under contract to NASA as like a NASA center that does most of the deep space unmanned missions, where Houston does the manned missions and Goddard does the Earth orbital missions.
Okay. Well, you left the ranch. You got away from the ranch, but now you're back.
Right.
How did you happen to end up here?
Well, I kind of felt I would like to preserve the ranch, keep the ranch in the family. And when my dad was getting up in years, and as I said, my sister couldn't manage everything, they decided to move into town, and they were gonna, what do we do with the ranch? So that was that was an interesting thing. See, getting my dad off the ranch was difficult, and so we were gonna retire. We were about getting ready to retire. And so they said, well, why don't you take over the ranch? Well, so we decided to try that. I've tried just about everything you can think of so far, and I've got some more ideas of what to do with the ranch. As I told you before, my folks lived off the land, essentially, from the products they had. But as time went on, it became non-economical. I mean, you can't earn a living on this land now, okay? Or you don't want to earn a living on this land because there's no product. You take, for example, we're just shipping out the cattle here. We'll probably get $8 a head for per month per animal, so that's 30 months. When you add it all up versus the price of the land of your investment, it is ridiculously low return on your land investment. So what I tried to do was try to figure out some alternative uses, and we haven't hit on any really good except building a couple of homes on it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Still looking.
still
We
looking.
can ask a little bit more about that in a
Yes.
few minutes. But we do want to get back to that. Okay. I want to talk a little bit more about this area and what was Highway 4 like, and what was this neighborhood like when you were growing up here?
Okay, let me see. Highway 4 was a little two-lane road that went through here. In fact, stories were it was a dirt road at one time, but oh, here's a picture of it. You can see there.
Yeah.
You can't see Highway 4, but this is taken from the other side, and right down here is the entry to Highway 4, coming right off Highway 4. It was a two-lane road, and it used to be that when my folks would have the cows that they milked, they milked cows, they would drive the cattle across the road, stop the traffic, and drive the cows across to bring them in to milk in the morning, take them across the road after they finished, bring them back and forth. So it was, or you would haul hay down the road, okay? So that was Highway 4. Then it became widened. Then it became a freeway, and one of the biggest things my folks always wanted was an underpass to go so that they could keep their business going. Mm-hmm. The state wouldn't allow that because it was too expensive to put an underpass in for that. So.
You mentioned the crops that were grown here, and I wanted to get back a little bit to the watershed, and I was
Okay.
wondering, were the crops irrigated, or were they just
No. There was no irrigation. It was all dry farming. Okay. So water has been the biggest. Let's say water has been the biggest problem for this land. Okay, and I think we've kind of solved that problem. We've got the one dam here, which is only a quarter full now because we had such little rain, and then down below we have another down the creek we have another place where we've dammed it up, and then we had a geologist come out and he recommended drilling a well up on top of the hill. You can look on top of the hill, you see a couple of tanks there, and down over by those trees, right in that corner, is where we have a well, and we hit 80 gallons a minute, which you're only required to have about 3 gallons a minute for a home. So we have lots of water, and my daughter drilled another well on the other knoll, and she hit good water also. So hopefully we can do something with this if the water holds out forever.
Did the family or the neighbors use the creek for recreation in any way?
No. I played in the creek a lot, but
Did you? Did you?
I dammed it up as a little kid,
Your children did too.
What?
Your children did too.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So they played in the water and
Yeah.
Yeah.
ended up.
Yeah,
We
huh.
come up here every summer.
And stay with Grandma and Grandpa?
Yes, uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
We'd ship 2 at a time.
Can you describe how the creek was at the time? Did it look the same as it does now, or was it different?
Well, it was pretty original. You know, there was lots of trees growing along it when they put the roads in here. Especially down here, they filled the creek. They filled the creek, which was a big mistake as far as I was concerned, because if they had left it down and not filled the area, it would have been a much more natural thing. And so hopefully we will try to restore that and retain the water. And one of the projects we're hoping to do is to have a retention and detention dam down there. But with the permitting process, I don't know if it's going to happen. Okay.
Well, what year was the road built? Do you know when it was
Let's see. In 1942, Route 4 was widened. In 1956, I think, Cummings Skyway went in, and in 1962, they made Route 4 a freeway, and they took some more property and had an off ramp that went onto Cummings Skyway.
I'm kind of in the same regard as how the creek used to be many years ago. Do you have any recollection of how your grandpa or what your father recalled of the land before they started farming it? Was it already being like dry farmed when they bought it, or did they
You know,
alter it and stuff?
I don't know that it was farmed before my granduncle farmed it or not. I think it might have been, because it went through some other people's hands, and they might have farmed it, because it was in the 1860s that this land was transferred from a big landholder to, it was divided up with the neighbor Stewarts, and the Dolan Ranch here was another previous owner. And I don't know if they farmed it or not. Okay.
I'd like to ask a few more questions about the creek, but just because of our power supply, I asked you what you wanted to talk about during this interview besides my questions, and you said you wanted to talk about the evolution of property use and
Yes,
the ways to use this land. So let's make sure we get those questions.
Well, I think
Talk about that.
I think what we have here, if you look around here, you have a lot of open space. See, and my scenario for this, what has happened, is we've gone from acorns back to acorns.
What do
In
you
this
mean by
respect, the Indians gathered acorns in this area, see? And then it was farmed, and then there's cattle, and then people are buying up the land, the land trust, and they're returning it to acorns for the benefit of people. So that's about lots of the land that goes into the regional park districts is reverted to producing nothing but acorns. So what I'm saying is that something should be done with the land to be compatible with the economics of the situation and with the environmental aspects of it. And that's a difficult thing. And there's many obstacles to do that. Too many obstacles that are preventing that from happening, in my opinion. Okay, and I'm going to try to change it a little way. By first by setting up an example on these parcels, and then hopefully, I don't know, if I live long enough.
Well, it sounds like you have some ideas about
Yes.
what could be done. Would you like to talk a little bit more about that?
Well, water. okay, is that water is the essential ingredient to do any kind of farming on this kind. You don't do farming on dry farming. That's not going to be profitable. If we can if we can contain the water that falls on this land and reuse it, eventually it's going to get released to the creek. In fact, by damming it up here, we have a flow. The creek used to dry up in a dry season, like a year like this. The creek would be completely dry. There wouldn't be a trickle of water. With the dam sitting up there, the water seeps down to the ground and it flows all year round. Ever since we put that in, so this benefits everybody downstream. It's a continuous flow of water. You're retaining it, and it's released slowly through through percolation and through the soil. It also benefits the crops. It benefits the wildlife. We have down along the old house there. I planted 50 trees. Okay, my son, if you go down the road here, he's watering about 25 more trees that he's planted since he's been here. See, so we will gain the benefit from the water that we can retain here for our own crops, for wildlife. Just the other night, there were 4 deer coming across the property here, seeking a spring we tried to develop up in the canyon there, getting water. Okay, I hope we can get enough coverage in here to have wild turkeys in here. See, so so it can work both ways.
Mm-hmm. What do you think needs to happen to make your farm and perhaps other farms economically viable? I mean, you've got some ideas for your property. Are there some other larger issues preventing it?
Yeah, I think there's so many restrictions on your property. For example, we have the land is in the Williamson Act, the Agricultural Preservation Act of 1965.
Maybe you could explain that.
That was a California statewide law that was passed in 1965 to keep ranchers from selling their land because the taxes were so high that they were losing money on it. So, which was the case for our land. So they reduced the taxes drastically on the land, with the agreement, with the contract with the owner, that he would restrict himself to agricultural pursuits, raising crops and things like whatever. So you signed a contract with the state, which was administered by the county. The county administers the Williamson Act for the state. And for example, before Tom and Kathy could build on the house here, we had to amend the Williamson Act to allow that. Then the next thing that came along was the Barones Hill Preservation Area, which essentially stated that no other city would import any water in here or any natural facilities like natural gas or that you could use to use for development of some kind of business. Okay, so we were restricted from doing a business on this land, and then the zoning laws are becoming outrageous, in my opinion. For example, when we first moved here in 1991, the zoning was that you could build a home on 5 acres. Now it's 40 acres. You need a minimum of 40 acres to build the home on it. See, when you try to build a home on here, you're subject to some of the most ridiculous environmental constraints on here. That is, for example, the watershed once has proposed to not increase impervious surfaces because you get fast runoff. See, you want the water to percolate into the soil. The Rodeo Hercules Fire Department demands a 12-foot wide road up here, paved. We can't. We have electricity from that power pole, fortunately, up to this stand right here. We can't connect it to now. I have to run on the generator because they won't give you a permit to put a meter on there until your house is completed. The soil inspections thing. So they are not cooperative. They have, you know, it's the biggest bureaucracy I've ever run into, okay? And it's arrogant, in my opinion, okay? And so I know people, not just little me, but big people who own big land will not have anything to do with any person that has anything to do with the administration or the county or anything. And that's unfortunate. Okay, so we're both losing, I think. That's my soapbox.
Okay.
Wife says, "Get off your soapbox."
Are we done?
We're good, yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. Are there obstacles that you see from the county or other areas that are preventing you or other ranchers or farmers from making their land more profitable?
Yes, definitely.
What are give me some examples of those?
You can only use it for a limited number of agricultural purposes, okay? I tried very hard when I was up here to get sludge put on the land. I found out that if you put sludge, and you know what sludge is, it will raise the crops multiple times, see? That was a health and safety issue with the county, okay? Now maybe it is, maybe it's not, okay? I tried, you see that pile of stuff out the window right here? That's all green waste. That's all decomposed green waste. And so we were able to do that. Unfortunately, the damn thing caught on fire for once because of self-combustion, see? So that, you know, had to slow down. So yes, there are restrictions, and I haven't found out yet what is a profitable thing to do with the property. We've tried other things like horse boarding business, which failed, not because of anybody from the county, because of internal problems in the family. Okay, and a nursery operation can be done. So there are obstacles that are there that are preventing this. In my opinion, it's a big picture opinion, okay? People should be building homes on the hills and leaving the valleys for the riparian and wildlife habitat. Wildlife doesn't live on top of these hills. There's no cover. There's nothing, no water. Okay.
Okay. Let's see. Maybe we could get back to the creek a little bit. Or perhaps before we do that, I was curious about wildlife. You mentioned perhaps getting wild turkeys going here and some deer in the area. What other wildlife have you seen up here?
We've seen a few foxes here. Once in a while you see a fox in here. Coyotes once in a while. Coyote sits up on the hill and watches what we're doing. You know, and we used to have jackrabbits. You know, I told you I used to go out hunting with my my .22 and my dog, and he would chase the jackrabbits down, and I would pretend I shot him. But they're gone. I mean, I haven't seen a jackrabbit here for 10 years, okay? There's gophers. You want some gophers? There's thousands of gophers around here. We used to have a lot of ground squirrels, but those were eradicated by the county because they would destroy crops, you know. So and the county provided, or the county or the state, I don't know who, what the agent would come around and gas them and kill them, you know. So you don't want them around.
I think the gophers would also damage crops, but
Yes,
not
yes,
so
they do.
much, but
Yes, they do. But there's no official agency that's extracting them.
Okay. What about the vegetation? How has that changed over the years, particularly along the creek? Have you noticed invasive species moving in, or is it...
Well, I don't. Yeah, this is, as long as I can remember, it's always been, you know, this has always been grassland, okay? And people say now that these are exotic grasses that are coming in here and they don't have deep enough roots so that they can survive, and they dry up like they are right now. The other thing that has happened here is that we had a terrible infestation of yellow star thistles, okay? I mean, a few years ago, since we've been here, these hills were just covered with them. You couldn't walk through the hills, they were so bad. So, and I don't know what has happened with them, but they have seemed to disappear. And I think maybe a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're not grazing down the land so much. If you don't graze the last blade of grass off of there, the yellow stars don't come up. If you leave grass like we have right now, they don't have a chance to germinate or to grow. But then you don't get enough money from the cattle because they don't eat all the grass off. See, so it's a trade-off. See.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Maybe we could talk a little bit about just some family memories about weather or climatic events. We did a timeline about some things that happened in the Martinez area, like there's a big snowstorm in the 20s and some flooding episodes and things like that. Do you have any memories of family stories about that sort of thing?
Not really. It snowed a couple times when we were kids, you know, and that was a big thing. But that was no. See, we're up so high, we don't worry about flooding.
Has anyone in your family ever been connected with commercial fishing?
No, not at all. No.
How about memories at the ferry? Do you ever remember people in the family talking about the ferry from Martinez in the old days?
Oh yeah, The ferry.
Do you remember any stories about the ferry before the bridge went in or something like that?
Well, I know from the history of the ferry in Crockett, you know, going across to Vallejo, was eliminated about the year I was born, 1927. Yeah, so but we used to take the ferry from Martinez to Benicia before the bridge was built. The railroad bridge was in, but there was no road bridge, and the ferry was still operating out of Martinez when I was a kid. And then, of course, going to San Francisco, we always used to have to take the ferry. We had friends from San Francisco, and we used to go. When I was a kid, I used to visit them and spend a week in the city. And, you know, that was the only way we communicated was over the ferries, going to the ferry building, so forth.
Well, it was really used for ferries, huh?
Yes.
Okay. How about a little more on the watershed. Do you remember ever having problems with the creek up at this high end as far as erosion or people putting trash in the creek or anything
Not
like
until
that?
they put Cummings Skyway in.
You said they filled in the creek at that point.
Well, they did fill in the creek, but up the creek here, they did a very poor job in erosion control. If you go down, if you drive down, and you look across the dam, you'll see a culvert coming across out of Cummings Skyway, under Cummings Skyway, which is used to be about 3 or 4 feet high, and just dropped into the thing. And now it got down to about 10 feet erosion. Along the roadway, they have cement culverts that drop right into the land and
Onto your
erode.
property?
Yeah, into our property. I've put on a whole bunch of cement to stop the erosion, because the erosion was pretty terrific. You would, in fact, the lower place where I said you filled the creek, that thing was so high, it was about 3 feet above. The culverts that drained Route 4 were covered from the erosion from up here. So the erosion control on Cummings Skyway is not the best design, and you have the natural erosion of slumping. You can look across right over there and see that great big slump that just occurred.
Oh, yeah.
That just occurred this year. And across the way, you can look there. Some of our property is known as in the watershed report. It's just for the slumping.
Yeah.
It just comes.
Now, did that happen historically? Have there is slumping a natural?
Yeah, it's just
event?
a natural event. Okay.
So it's not
You
completely
could-
due to erosion.
It kind of is. You look across the way over there, and that whole side of the hill is, well, it's in that direction. We can point it out later, but you can't see it hardly. But
Take a look around.
it just comes here. A gopher can run up, make a hole uphill. The water gets in that hole and can just take the whole hill. I crawled through gopher holes,
Did
you know, that have been eroded out.
Do you have any vivid memory about erosion or flooding or anything like that up here?
No, not really. It's just a fact of life. It was a fact of life, and it wasn't of concern to us as much as it was to the people in downstream. Yeah.
Can be big problems downstream. Has any of this affected the property value of your property here?
I don't know that it has. I can't. It's hard to tell. I think there's so many other factors that it would be hard to pick that out as a separate item.
We've covered some of these in other ways. Let's see. Wanted to ask some questions about the human-made changes to the creek and the area. You mentioned culverting and the dam. Were there any other human changes to this area?
Well, yeah, all down Franklin Canyon.
Did you?
We spoke earlier of it being a 2-lane road winding along the creek. And when they widened it, and they were going to use that as a freeway, they built that whole section all the way down from the end of our ranch, all the way down into McCary Road.
Ranch Road, yeah.
McCary Ranch Road. That's all mostly all underground now. Some of it is still open, but a lot of that is big culverts. It's just.
So Franklin Canyon was originally going to be the highway? In there?
Yes.
And was that the original road before Highway
Yeah.
4 was built?
Yes.
Oh.
That was the original. They widened it right across from McCary Ranch Road. They were condemned the home that was up on the left as you go down, and the whole hill slid down into the road. They diverted the road around it, and then they built the later years they built the freeway through there up in the hills. See, so. And then when they built the freeway, they've just filled all the canyons. It's filled all the canyons. They should have left the canyons open and let the water sit in there. It would have been a good source of water to keep the creek flowing.
Were there any community meetings about this, or are you aware of anything? Or
No, there were not. There
then.
were not. There were just right-of-way agents. That.
At that time, they just
That was it.
come through and do it. So.
Yeah.
Was there any opposition to those things? In the
Violent opposition for example, on my folks' part. Okay. And it was coming Skyway. They wouldn't sign. It had to been condemned and had to go to court. Okay. Because it was just.
Is that part of their property?
Yeah. Yeah. You see, as I said, the ranch was originally divided by this little 2-lane road that we used to be able to cross at leisure, and then when Cumming Skyway went through, the ranch was cut into 3 pieces. There was no way to get your animals from one side to the other without trucking them across. And my folks never afforded or big enough to have trucks, and then you'd have to have loading chutes on each side and so forth. So it was just it just became difficult.
Were neighbors, some of your neighbors, affected in the same way?
Well, yeah. I mean, people down the road I know were violently opposed to the road, but a lot of that too was just plain stubbornness. Okay, the road was going to come through. You have to have highways through property, but a lot of people just didn't want anything to happen. See, but
you think the government, county and state governments are more responsive to getting input from property owners now, or has it not improved?
I think there's more hearings about it, but I don't think there's much change. Okay, you have an appeal to the right-of-way agent, but I don't think it matters that much. Okay, I think.
Are you aware of any community efforts to protect the Alhambra Creek watershed area? Over the years, have you been involved in any of that? Or?
Yeah, we've been active members in the Alhambra Creek watershed planning group from day one, and I think I'm going to give you a word for the Alhambra Creek watershed committee, or what is the working group now they call it. I think that was the closest thing that ever happened to be in what I'll call systems engineering for the whole system. We had voices from the environmentalists, from the ranchers, from the government. Mitch Avalon is still the chairman of it, and Igor, how do you pronounce his name? Gagov. He's the heart of the whole thing. He's the guy who makes the whole thing work. And Shirley. And I like them. They're good people, okay? And we finally got to working together. And I think the ranchers have let us down. Okay, I think the stakeholder ranchers
In what way?
By not attending.
Oh.
They're dropping out. And so it's been, I don't know, but this for to be true, but I feel that the Resource Conservation District has kind of gone environmental, you know. They were headed by a ranching group, you know, Tom Brumley and that crowd, and I gather that they have employees that are more environmentally oriented versus agriculturally oriented. I don't know that for a fact, but I'm going to check out with Carla Coop and talk to her and see if we can. But I think the only way you're going to solve this impasse or this difficulty is through communications, like we're doing right now. Okay, I think this is what's so important, and the efforts that you two are doing, your volunteer work is great. All right, and I appreciate it, and that's why I'm doing this. But I think there's just not enough what I'll call systems engineering. And that's what I was trained as, and I think those things should be applied to the watershed and to the environment. And we were approaching that in the watershed committee. I really think we were, and then I think it's kind of gone astray because of lack of appreciation, not from the community but from the stakeholders in the we spoke the other day of Frank Pereira passing away. Bob Chapman is not active anymore in it. I'm going to talk to Bob about that, and I'm going to try and get some other input into that, because I think we had a good plan. It was unbelievable that we could get consensus.
So you think that's what's needed in the
Yes.
watershed?
Yes, yes,
Group is to
yes. I think we need to rejuvenate that effort. Okay, and I'm going to try to help do that.
Could you see something like that forming to assist you and other ranchers and farmers with your vision of
Yes, yes,
more useful,
yes, yes, yes.
and profitable land?
Yes, that's the only way it's going to happen. Okay, we can't outvote you. We can't outvote the community. We've got to go through. You can't fight them. I mean, they're too big. But I think if people understand the history of this place and what it was like, I'll tell you a little story, okay? As I told you, my father, we raised hay, okay? And my father, every once in a while, had odd jobs, working on the hay press or the threshing machine. One time he was hired by the owner of the John Muir home. And this was I don't know who the owner was at the time, but with a little kid, I went down there and my dad brought his team down there with the little wagon, and they put a tank of pesticide on it. They were spraying the orchard that was down below, all the way from John Muir House down to the Shell station on Alhambra Avenue. That was all orchard, and then we sold hay to and I think the man lived in the adobe. I'm not sure. I haven't investigated that yet. But you know where we stored the hay? In John Muir's kitchen. We desecrated the holy place. But that's true.
Is it?
It was just an old house,
Yeah,
see?
yeah. Good place.
And
Well, that'd be a good place to end.
Well, that's
Yeah.
before it became a monument.
okay.
Is there anything else you want to?
No, I think that was very, very profitable. I think
I
that's
think so too.
key.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much
right,
for
right.
having us in your home here and on your
This is
land.
not our home.
I meant to ask you that. How long have you been right here in the trailer?
No, we came up here at the end of April. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No.
We're not going to stay here in the wintertime.
No, I think it'd be kind of
But
cold and damp.
we're
Where's
just
your home then? You still have a
we have a
down
home in a little a community of La Crescenta. It's near Pasadena. We're about 5 miles from the Rose Bowl, where the Rose Bowl is, right near where Jet Propulsion Lab is. I think. But yeah, I got some pictures here.
If you have any ideas about
If we could
Thanks.
maybe we'll play some here, and we still have your mic, so it'd be great to have you.
I brought my digital
Explain a
camera
little
also.
more. Okay.
I know I should have brought the tripod, but I didn't.
Either way will work, because we could always take images out for the video.
To come around.
Can you
and-
start over? I didn't have
Okay, this is a threshing machine that used to come around from farm to farm, and they would separate the wheat from the chaff, you know, and sack it up for you, and you would pay them a certain amount of money for the amount of work they did. Oh, criminy!
No, we will.
Of the hay press. Again, the hay press was somebody owned this press, and they would go from ranch to ranch and bale the hay. The hay was either hauled into the barn loose, or it was baled.
We're putting John Muir's house. Kitchen.
Right. And this press, this hay press was powered by 2 horses running around the track. It was horsepower. Okay.
Original horsepower. Huh?
Yeah. Here's a picture of a man killing buck rake, a horse killing buck rake. It was horses pushed this rake, and it would take the hay shocks, the piles of hay, and push them into the hay press.
Oh, into the machine. Oh, so
Not
this is
it
another-
wasn't pushed. It pushed them up to the machine, and then it was fed into the machine.
Oh, okay.
Here's a picture of just my uncle,
wonderful.
my
Is that your
uncle,
uncle?
granduncle.
Uh-huh. Oh my.
Is he on his horse?
No, he's
Behind a
behind
pair
a.
of
I don't know what the
horses.
heck machine, what that is, what the device is.
Wait. Well, I wouldn't know what it would be, but
Mhm.
I couldn't even guess without seeing it.
Well, you would cut the hay, and the hay would lay down all over, you know, as it was, and then you put it into rows, into long rows that ran up and down the hill, and then you bucked it into shocks, and those shocks were what you either pitched into the wagon and put into the.
Dog with him there.
Yeah, we took a lot of pictures of all the town and all the family and things like that.
Yeah, big houses.
And when we got back, my dad, we spent at least an hour on every picture. He would say who lived there and who was there and so forth. And that finally motivated. We couldn't get them to come back when we were there, but when they saw the pictures, especially when they saw their parents' grave sites, you know, that was.
It was a long trip back there.
Yeah.
People didn't drop.
This is my Uncle Joe and me.
Your great uncle Joe that
Yeah.
owned the property.
Yeah. Well, he'd be my great uncle, yeah. So the house was
Did you get this one? That's great uncle Joe that owned the property. Also Joseph Brenkle. Huh?
mhm.
We got all of these. Boy, that wind is blowing.
Yeah, it is.
This trailer was rocking last night.
Was it? Oh. Yeah, it was cold and windy last night.
Yeah, it sure has been picking up a lot lately. Downtown too.
And this for example is my Uncle Joe and his wife. What was her name? I can't think of her name right now.
Oops, sorry, Brett.
I never met her, and this is my dad. Looked like a new immigrant here. He must have been just here. The first car they had.
Julia.
Julia, right.
I never met her, but now this is the first time I've seen this picture.
Okay.
The three of you, your brother and sister?
Yeah,
you?
that's the three of us. Uh-huh.
Can we get that?
Yeah.
Can we? I'll take it out of the plastic so we can get maybe a shot without the shine. So this is you, Joe, and
Yes,
then
uh-huh.
Betty, and who's the other guy?
Jack.
Jack.
Jack. see.
Now, someone told me you didn't have electricity up here for the longest time. Is that true?
Oh,
We
no.
never didn't have electricity until the 1950s.
I
Did you
tease
catch
him.
that?
Until the 1950s?
1950s.
Wow.
Yeah.
He's a real ably.
We had kerosene lamps,
Did you really?
and at first we just had a wood stove. That was the only heat we had, and then we had
I'd
a
like to
coal.
hear the woman's story of this ranch life. That would be another whole
Oh, yeah. Well,
story. I mean, cooking and cleaning, you know, washing
I'll
the
tell
kids'
you what it was
clothes. And,
like, because my mother-in-law did not change too much.
you know,
Yeah.
but no, we had a gasoline. I'm sorry. We had.
What? What are you trying to say?
We didn't have electricity. Okay, we didn't have a telephone. We had
you mean the lamps?
no a telephone.
No, I meant the kerosene lamps.
Yeah, we had kerosene lamps
Mhm.
for light. We had a wood stove, and then we had a kerosene stove that you could burn, do light cooking on. But if you wanted to take a bath, you had to light the wood stove to heat the water in the thing. You
It's
know.
going back a generation. Did your
Yeah.
parents just choose to not
No, it
put in
was
some of the modern conveniences, or was it economic? Or?
well
What do you
at the first it wasn't economic,
Mm-hmm.
and then when it was economic, my dad didn't want to. See.
Yeah.
He was- yeah. So let's see.
Did you get this
But
one then?
but anyway,
Yeah.
then they got a butane tank, and that was a big deal. Where we had a refrigerator instead of an ice box.
Give me that box.
Find some photos.
Fine.
These we have pictures of all of those. I like these ones of the scene of what the whole valley looked like, you know, before the roads went.
Oh, I
through.
got a perfect one. Well,
You
no,
have one of those.
a water. You want a watershed?
And Betty was a nurse then, you said?
Yes,
Where
uh-huh.
did she work?
She worked in county.
Oh,
She worked
really?
at county, and yeah, all
Maybe
the
we should
time.
talk to her.
Uh huh.
Would she talk to us, do you think?
Sure.
Sure she would.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting
Oh.
to...
Did you show them this?
These are dead end kids.
Oh, look.
Wow.
That's
Can you
my,
tell us who's in the picture there?
that's me and
Okay.
my brother and sister.
So you're the oldest and she's the youngest. Oh, cute.
And this isn't for posterity, but they're our
Let's see.
kids.
Oh. Can we take it?
Sure, if you want to.
Oh, sure, the next generation.
Yeah.
And they came up to the ranch to live with Grandma and
Oh,
Grandpa
yeah.
and see this
Yeah.
different sort of
And-
life compared to their...
See, my mom was back east, and I didn't bring her back here until it was 81, I think. So they never, didn't see my mother that much. So Grandma Brenkle was the main grandma, and this is the boy that's building, and that's the gal that's going to build on another hill. And this is John. He's the landscaper, and that's Debbie, the one who lives in the ranch house now, and she's the one that's sick. Oh.
This is the old horse barn, and you see, I used to drive the hay wagon. The hay wagon would pull into this thing, and just before it stopped at the door, and then off the top of here they would have a forklift, and it would lift the hay up, run it back on the track, and dump it into the barn. And you haul the hay in. You pitch the hay into the wagon. You hauled it down here. You put it into the barn, and then you fed it to the horses.
That barn was built in 1903, according to what my mother-in-law told me. It's falling down.
Not still on the property, but
Yeah.
falling down.
It's falling down. Yeah.
Here's my mother and father in the later years. My mother loved to grow garden. Her roses.
Yeah.
Her roses were her.
Yeah, gave 'em- Did they speak German at home initially?
No, they wouldn't.
No?
They wouldn't speak German. They never taught me German. That was one of the
They wanted
biggest
you to learn
discipline.
English?
Yeah, but I could have used German so much,
Yeah.
so much in my travels.
When we came back from Germany, our oldest, our sixth daughter, had learned to speak German. And Grandma said to her, I can say it in German, du bist ein kleines Schwein, you're a little pig. And Debbie turned around and says, Nein, Oma, du bist eine große Schwein, you're a big pig. And my mother-in-law was so happy.
This is a
You know,
cross.
one of her grandchildren could speak German or even understand her. You know?
That's a picture across the road,
Oh, okay.
looking down one of the canyons. But that's part of the Alhambra Creek watershed.
Which direction are we looking in this?
They're looking to the north, more or less. But if you go down Martinez, if you go down to not Cummings Valley,
Franklin Canyon?
Franklin Canyon Road, the first barn on the right, that's that barn, and up
Okay.
the.
Okay.
Can't believe you can pick that up with that.
Amazing, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, so that's new. Even though it has broken leaves, it's